Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Middle Ground, Mike. We got a great guest here today, Scott Grace, who's wrote several books. Got Grace on humor, healing, and we're going to try to find the middle ground. Scott, introduce yourself to everybody and kind of tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Once upon a time, my name was Scott Kallichstein, and I changed it legally to Grace. And I've been everything from a speaker to a singer to a comedian. I once opened for Robin Williams and several other professional people who are very well known. So I've had quite a career in the arts. I'm writing my fifth book now, and everything that I do is to uplift people, inspire, educate. I'm a coach. I'm also a psychic. I love to read people and tell them things that I couldn't possibly know. I
That's
like
awesome.
blowing people's mind and usually, in a way that gives them a smile or a tear or both.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like we were kind of talking in the pre-session, we're very similar, very similar styles to, how we can come to a middle ground a little bit. You know, I'd love for you to kick us off a little bit with your spiritual Dr. Seuss opening poem, from your Red and
Yeah,
Blue talks.
sure. Yeah. So this way of communicating started about 14 years ago when my daughter was 2 years old. And I was tucking her in with a Dr. Seuss poem. And when I was done and she fell asleep, I couldn't get the Dr. Seuss rhyming to stop. It was just in my head. It was kind of annoying until I went to my computer and started to write stuff down and realized that I was writing some profound rhymes. And so for about 10 years, I wrote six poems, a book, several viral videos, and that Dr. Seuss energy is available for any topic in the moment. You can ask me to like riff on anything. But for now, for the new book and the new talk that I've been giving, it's Dr. Seuss who opens it up by saying, "This little talk begins with some rhyming. Consult Dr. Seuss for a lesson in timing. But this is no fable for kids getting tucked in. It's a wake up adults talk for the nightmares we're stuck in. A talk without answers, but full of good questions. Ones to chew slowly for mindful digestion. Like, why do most people see just red or blue? Could there be more than one valid view? Are opinions synonymous with what is true? Is this what our founders envisioned we'd do? Now, old honest Abe, he was my man. A house this divided cannot long stand. He was Republican, President Lincoln, and I'd like to see more of the ways he was thinking. Why are opinions so goddamn rigid? Why is this Cold War becoming more frigid? How could we get so extreme? Is this the American dream? I almost forgot. Let's see. Oh, yeah. How could extremes become so attractive? How could our brains become so reactive? I've got a theory that still needs more cooking, but it's about the glasses through which we are looking. A strong pair of glasses that block out the light, that show us two colors, just black and just white. A dark pair of glasses that block in the white that show us two colors, just black and just white. No room for discussion. You're wrong and I'm right. Blood pressure rises, adrenaline spikes, till I'm left with two choices, just fight or just flight. And when on the menu there's only two F's, it brings out my worst traits and hides all my rest.
How blame won't work, right? So,
Well,
yeah, so, for me, like I've always said this, that I find it hard to believe that one side's the blame versus the other, right? I kind of just, you look at a lot of your hot button issues and you can really see, I mean, contradictions on both sides, right? But our life is a huge contradiction, if anything. But, how do we actually change this without going, hey, it's your fault in particular, because it's more of a societal thing to me than it is any one individual or one, side or stream party. A societal thing, it's become tribal politics, kind of like how on a sports team, right? You got your favorite sports team. Like I'm a Detroit Lions fan from, Detroit. You get all riled up against your opposing fans, but it's broke down so much in our system here in America that we can't see beyond that. Like it could be that opposite fan getting hit by a bus per se, right? And people here, politically would be like, well, okay, they would be fine with it. So from your point of view, how do you think we can, I guess, bridge that gap? Change it without assigning like the one thing in particular.
Well, it's going to have to happen one heart and mind at a time. I believe that when there's this amount of division and hatred going on between left and right, that there are people behind the scenes that feed off of that. And their motto is divide and conquer. I don't know who those people are. I have a feeling there's a bunch of bankers, and some of them are Republicans, some of them are Democrats. Many of them have no political, they just want to run the world. They want to control everything. And they know that the only way that they can have that kind of power is by having people divided. And it's like we create this friction and they get off. You follow the money, you follow the control freaks that want to control the world, that want to put little chips into our bodies so that our finances and everything can be tracked. That's where certain people want to take things. And they need everybody to be angry at each other for something like, and then they're going to come along and they're going to make this chip or whatever it is so attractive. It's going to seem like it's just going to make life so much easier. People are going to be lining up to get this, whatever it is. And I think that's the beginning of the end, really. So there's something about the way that we've been taught to fight against each other that is such a tragic trap that we've fallen into. And Joseph and I were talking earlier before we started about the level of the way that politicians who were very in much disagreement used to get along even with disagreements. You
Yes.
had an example, Joseph. I have one. So it used to be that there was Newt Gingrich, who ran for president and who was the head of the Republican Party. Well, he was imitated very well by a Saturday Night Live member. Who was the big guy? Farley?
Chris
Uh,
Farley, yeah.
Chris Farley. So Chris Farley was invited by the Republican Party to go to their convention and pretend he was Newt Gingrich, who was running for president at the time. And so he did his exaggerated Newt Gingrich imitation, and all of the Republicans at the convention were cracking up, including Newt. And it was just so much fun to see how political satire used to be so appreciated. People weren't afraid to laugh at each other. And enemies on both parties would put down their weapons and go have lunch and treat each other for lunch and have beers together and put aside the differences and just realize that they're all part of the same democracy at work. That doesn't happen anymore. We don't laugh. We don't,
No, we
the
don't.
people may laugh, but certainly the politicians do not. There has to be so much tension around disagreements as if one side is wrong and the other side is right.
Yes. Big time. It's kind of fun about you talk about Newt Gingrich, right? So, and even though it was chaotic and it resulted in a government shutdown in the 90s, Newt and Bill Clinton really worked out a way to balance the budget per se,
Mhm.
and kind of really helped, they got the, spending was under control. Things started to really take off. Now there's some things that they kind of left out that really kind of caused the collapse, towards 2000 or whatever, but nothing's perfect, right? Everything's cyclical. But they were able to get it done. It was crazy. It was tense, but they got it done. Where now our politicians, there might be a riot over paying the electric bill, and you just sit there and you go, why are we even having a debate over people getting Social Security that they paid into? Like, this is a debate. It shouldn't even be a debate. It shouldn't even be something that they have to discuss. It should just be done, and those, to me, those are things, right? Like, no matter your view on whether you view socialism, capitalism, these people paid into it. So they have every right to get what they paid into. And it shouldn't be, that's not a social program, right, per se, but it's viewed that way, but to me, by people on the right, because the funding hasn't been properly taken care of. So now it's become a liability rather than the people paid into the system, because the government borrows from it. So now it's become a liability that's become a political football, to where if it would have never been something the government could borrow from, I guarantee you Social Security would be flourishing right now.
Said, I do remember the rest of that poem.
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay, let's go for it. It's not so much that I remembered it as I put it up on my computer. Ha ha.
I know it goes.
I take good notes. So, yeah. So, I've got a theory that might be quite freeing. It points to the glasses through which we've been seeing, a dark pair of lenses that filter out light till all we can see is just black and just white. No room for discussion. You're wrong. I'm right. Blood pressure rises, adrenaline spikes, till I'm left with two options: fight or flight. And when I am choosing between two F's, it brings out my worst traits and hides all the rest. No listening to you. It's time to go tribal, to stick with my own kind and steer clear of my rivals. My rivals cannot be the least understood. It's safe to assume they are up to no good. I learned this from news shows that always agree with my view of the world and how it should be. Whether it's Fox News or MSNBC, it all sure sounds fair and balanced to me. These glasses ensure I obscure self-reflection. So I claim the high ground and moral direction. Now, it's easy to spot those dark glasses on Putin, but in my own mirror, now that I'm disputing, I've got to be blind to my mind's battlefront so I can cast blame on those liberals or Trump. Could it be most of us are wearing these glasses, letting the media blow smoke up our asses, using the internet for amplifying the reasons the other side needs demonizing? Our differences seemingly so polarizing, we spend half the day back and forth analyzing. And through algorithms, we see only our tribe and think the whole world is applauding our side. The trespassing's always those other damned asses, and never the fault of my own faulty glasses. May this poem help us take off those glasses and see what we have in common. Our humanity.
Hey, that's great.
That's it.
It flows. I like it. It definitely flows. I mean, kind of like speaking on like that, like a little bit of humor, right? So, we were talking about that and kind of like a little bit relating to your poem. Bill Maher is a guy like he's a really good example.
Well, an
He,
example of what?
well, dry comedy, if you want to call it, like some of his quick wits, that he like just spits out. He's definitely, I think, in this last election, kind of shifted a whole lot more to the center, like pretty hard to the center, where he used to be leaning left pretty well.
Yes.
Now he's definitely shifted far to the center, like left, center left, I should say. Maybe that's a better way to say it. And I guess that, but I like, I guess with Bill Maher, I like how he's able to stand by his convictions, even if people don't agree with him. But he's even gotten to a point where he can talk to people that he doesn't agree with, and he can
Yeah.
actually have a discussion with them, where the Bill Maher of 10 years ago would have never been able to do that.
Yeah.
The Bill Maher from 10 years ago would have never been able to do that. And now, I mean, I don't know if you had seen, he went to dinner at the White House and he had dinner with President Trump.
Yes.
And I thought it was really, I won't say cool or ironic, but he took all of all the insults Trump had made about him over the years or whatever, put it on a sheet of paper and and Donald Trump autographed it and thought they both thought it was funny. And, he said, I forgot how he worded it in his show, but he goes, the guy that you see on TV is not the guy that's running the country or something of that nature. That's what he
He
alluded to. He goes,
said that the Donald Trump that he met was really able to listen and be curious, um and he said he wasn't the caricature that we see on TV, that he actually seemed very reasonable in person.
yeah. And for me, I'm like, man, why can't the character makes sense because that's who he is. I think I wish maybe if he could just blend the two a little bit better, he might be a whole lot more popular. And the reason why I say that is if we take out all the crazy crap that's happened that everybody's assumed about both sides in the last 10 years, right? Let's just throw that out the window for the moment. A lot of his positions were positions a lot of people on the left has, especially with tariffs, things of that nature, 20, 30 years ago. Even in his first term, a lot of Democratic lawmakers supported his positions on tariffs in China, but they don't talk about that stuff. They don't talk about the fact that not all social issues, he's definitely pretty right, like in terms right leaning, I should say, or hard right, depending on the item. But economically, when you kind of just take the political noise out of everything, in a lot of ways, he's very left leaning. So everybody goes, well, he cut all these taxes. Well, yeah, he's getting the money back, but he's getting it back through tariffs. So yes, they did. We cut taxes. Yes, but they're also, and to me, with how our economy kind of works these days with the quote unquote gig economy, all that kind of stuff, right? Would it make more sense to go to an approach like that rather than taxing people for working these days? It made sense back when everybody had the 9 to 5. You went to the factory, you got your overtime, this, that. Well, everything's so all over the place now. It just feels like them collecting that revenue from one single stream makes a whole lot more sense than taking it out of people's paychecks. Because at least when they're not, when it comes on a product, you make a choice of what to buy. You make a choice of what tax to pay rather than you're just paying it because you showed up for work and you're already struggling. Like I guess that's where my mind goes with it. And when I kind of I sat down one day and I just really broke it all down for myself. It wasn't for nobody, it was for myself. And I'm like, man, that makes sense. I mean, I know like in the grand scheme of things, you look at the 30s, tariffs were a disaster, but the world was also a far different place then, you know. But I guess that's just I kind of go off on like a little bit of a thing about that. But I think that I think the current system is misunderstood. It doesn't work. I talk about in a lot of my episodes something that I've become very passionate about, and it gets where the blame comes in. Like I was talking, in our second segment here, the 17th Amendment of the United States. It was meant to get rid of corruption in the Senate and state legislators. Well, now it's a whole lot easier to whistleblow on corruption. Corruption's exposed a whole lot more. The Senate was supposed to represent the states, whereas the House was meant to represent you and I. Well, states have the same problems you and I do because they're more intertwined with, the average citizen than the federal government is. So if the state's problems were represented in the Senate and the House represented the people's problems, they're not too far off. And I think that, getting rid of that might restore a little bit of balance to the government like it was supposed to. I get why it was getting rid of at the time, or gotten rid of, I should say, but now I think it's kind of just post that, sometimes things just fade over time, right? Like prohibition. They figured out it didn't work. Well, these days, because it's no longer like it was 100 years ago. If you need healthcare in California, you cannot use the same formula for cost in Michigan as you would California, because if you do, it's not going to work. So certain things can't be done at a national level. They got to be done at a state level. To me, the federal government should kind of go in and support the states. Hey, you want healthcare for all your citizens? Great. How do we make this work based on our formulas, right? Perfectly fine. But you can't expect financially to make sense to use the same model in Michigan and California because the numbers just won't match. And I think that's what creates the fact that that lack of knowledge and it's all politicized in the Senate and House is why you have the problems in America you have today.
Spoken like a true Joseph.
I mean, so that's just, kind of my thing. But, the humor, like you were saying, you performed for Robin Williams. God rest his soul. Great man. Great, great human being. I mean, my wife is a diehard Robin Williams fan. Especially Patch Adams. It's probably one of her favorite movies of all time. I mean, when I tell you she's a diehard Robin Williams fan, diehard. I mean, if it's Robin Williams, she watches it. If she even sees it anywhere, but kind of, you've performed in front of audiences across spectrums, right? What role does humor play in keeping people open, willing to hear thought, right? And willing to just kind of open their hearts and their minds and just get rid of the hate and remember it's okay to be happy. Like Nike said, just do it.
Well, humor lightens things up, doesn't it? Humor could be attacking. Humor could be sarcastic. Humor can put one type of person down at the expense. And that's not the kind of humor I stand for. Uh, using humor as a weapon to get a point across. No, no, I like the kind of humor where it just helps people lighten up about serious stuff. And we're all on the same page when we're laughing. When we're laughing, we're the same species, human beings,
Yeah, we all occupy the same dirt.
laughing at the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, no, I mean we do, and it doesn't have to be this way. Like I had said earlier, I find people that are left leaning really seem to. I won't say gravitate because that's not the way to put it, but they seem to be definitely a little bit more willing and open to coming on my show. And I'm not knocking anybody on the right because I have a lot of friends on the right, but ironically, some of my best friends are on the left, like people I would consider actual best friends. And it's when you're talking like from like a head to the heart, right? The debate has to get into that emotional connection, but the humor kind of relates to that, right? It gives you that, okay, this wasn't going to go as bad as I thought it was going to. Like it gets that kind of out of the way.
Let's do a little humor for you right now. Little Dr. Seuss. So the spiritual Dr. Seuss wants to say this. So there's an inner critic in everyone. And one of the things the inner critic likes to do is to take a break from criticizing yourself and find things out in the world, like certain politicians or certain family members, to criticize so that you don't feel all this guilt and self blame. You project it out there. So, this is a little poem about that. The critic travels with you on this earth and is your companion for worser or worse. It pretends it's your coach, your badass amigo, and it pours on the guilt. That's the beverage of ego. It's there to protect you, to help you feel strong. So it has to remind you you're doing things wrong. You're weak and you're lazy and you don't have a clue. That's your drill sergeant critic trying to motivate you. Your critic wants you to be all you can be. So it gives you these pep talks all day and for free. The places you'll go and the guilt trips you'll travel. As your critic plays judge and bangs down on its gavel. But you always can get some relief from your shame by projecting it onto the others you'll blame. For that is the critic at its beastiest best. It nurses its grievances close to its chest. Republicans, liberals, your parents, your ex. The world is just loaded with folks to correct. If only those fools could get on with your ways, if only those fools could conform to your ways, you'd get on with life without further delay. That's a
That's
little
awesome.
taste of a longer poem.
Yeah, no, and I like your poem, and it does definitely go towards the heart, right? I like saying that. I have a saying sometimes, kind of, perception is reality to most people.
Perception is reality.
to most people. So if I look at a pen and I say it's blue, and I'm diehard convinced it's blue, but you're convinced that it's, say, a black writing pen, right? But no matter what it is, if we're both convinced of it, that's our reality. Now you got to find that middle area where it's like, okay, hey guys, let's all be real here for a minute. You know, but that's kind of like where I see the nature of debate is these days. You talked about your journey from head to the heart, right?
I did.
What does that look like in practical terms, if you want to say, especially when you talk about conversations about like world events or maybe even politics, things of that nature?
Well, it means going from my opinions to my feelings. And an opinion could be the world is going to hell. The feeling could be concern, worry, grief, anger, frustration. And feelings are closer to the heart. They're more the language of the heart to be able to, because they're vulnerable and it takes courage to just express feelings. It's a lot easier to express your judgments and your opinions. And that kind of divides us because everybody's got a different opinion and we all differ on how we see the world, the perception, as you say. But what we all have in common as humans is that we all experience anger, sadness, grief, frustration, joy, relief, and those emotions are how we communicate heart to heart and how we can be human together.
Right. No, I mean, that is key. I mean, it's about being able to be human, and kind of, like using the show, right? Kind of like the middle ground, finding a way to be curious and listening with respect, and
I
just
got a
being
story.
decent.
I got a about that.
Go for it.
So, my leanings have been liberal since my mother taught me about being a bleeding heart liberal because she was one. And so, during Trump's first presidency, uh, I had an opportunity to practice what I preach. And I was on an airplane, and right across the aisle from my aisle seat was a couple. They got on the plane. They both had their red MAGA hats on. And at a certain point, we had 4 hours, and I just reached out to them. I reached across the aisle, so to speak. And I said, because they were talking about their grandchildren. I heard enough. I said, "Tell me about your grandchildren. How many do you have?" And my intention was just to find a point of connection with people that I normally wouldn't reach out to. So I ended up just engaging them, like show me pictures and how old is this one? And they asked me about my daughter and I showed them pictures. And at a certain point, we built up enough rapport that I felt comfortable taking enough of a risk and asking them a question that had been on my mind, which was, what kind of world are you hoping that President Trump creates or helps create for your grandchildren and their children? What do you think Trump can do? And they painted a picture that was so exactly the same as what I want for my daughter and for all human beings. Like, so we wanted the same thing. We just had different ways of going about the different strategies that we thought would get us there, but we both wanted the same thing. I mean, they were, they weren't like racist or this or that. They wanted a better world. They wanted people to have equal opportunities. Everybody has enough food, just some of the basic things that are basic human decency we agreed upon. And I really appreciated that. I got home and I started to call up some of my friends who had voted for Trump and have dinner with some of them and others, just conversations. And I became really driven to understand the different points of view that would cause people to vote differently, that have usually very similar values to me, just that different ways of getting those values met. And I just started to feel like people on the left and people on the right may have may want the same things and just have different strategies, different ideas about how to get there.
Yeah,
And then go ahead.
I don't know. I have one that like it's a little bit of an opposite reason why I kind of have become the middle ground Mike per se, however you want to word that.
Go ahead.
I had a good friend, his name's Don, great human being, right? Christian, does all the right things, lives his values. You know what I mean? He's not one of those guys who says it but doesn't, just kind of puts no, he does things for the poor, puts in his time, donates, soup kitchens. One day we were having a discussion and I told him something, we were talking politics and he's a diehard Trump supporter. And I forgot what it was exactly we disagreed on with it. I think it had something in relation to one of the events. I disagree. He goes, "Well, you're just a left wing liberal."
He said
I'm
that to you?
yeah. I'm like, you can vote for somebody or and be critical of them. I'm like, it's okay, right? Like, you don't just because you voted for somebody or you like them doesn't mean you have to be all in or nothing. I said, you got to be better than that. Like, we got to be able to look at our own, you know what I mean, or your guy, whatever you want to call it, and go, hey man, you screwed up, let's move forward, let's figure it out, instead of just going, well, because you're you can do no wrong. you know it just kind of it's very similar to how some parents these days, my child would never do that even though they got him on camera doing it, even if it's school, at home, walk through the neighborhood doing something stupid like, being a bully, or it's just no matter what it is, because it's my person, there's no wrong. you know
Yeah.
so like, you talk like well, not, but like utopian principles, right? Like, even though that's not per se the traditional label of utopian, in terms of a thought process, to me that is a utopian thought process.
What do you think of that?
That's
So you're saying utopian is when your side can do no wrong?
Mhm.
Okay.
because everything's it's like an echo chamber. You only hear what you want to hear. Everything's sunshine and rainbows when your person's handling it, and they can do no wrong. And
They
that
can do no wrong. That's scary. I
and
don't like that.
there's so many people these days that just think that way. And
Yeah.
I will talk to someone and I literally had someone tell me, they were like, well, and it was online, well, if I seen a Trump supporter, I would just punch them in the face. And I'm like, for what? And they're like, because they're just evil. They're racist. And I'm like, I know a lot of Trump supporters and I have yet to meet one. I know they're out there because I've seen
Yeah.
plenty of them. I
Yeah.
would say 99% of them have no relation to anything like that. They don't view life that way. They don't view people that way. But it's just like any side, right? The little tiny 1% that screams the loudest gets the most attention. And so I just find it very, odd, right? And it's just this, every side has this desire for their perfect utopia of only their ideas and conform with it, or you can go somewhere else. And to me, that is very anti.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to be very popular on either side because
I know,
you
I
know
know.
you're either with me or against me, but there's no middle ground, senor. You got to choose sides.
Yeah, I'm finding that a lot of people, they always talk about the silent majority, right? I'm finding that they're definitely looking for a place where they can just hear both, right? And hear it without me saying you're a terrible person because you're liberal leaning. Like, who cares, man? Like you were saying, at the end of the day, grandkids, kids, like no matter what in life, I care more about my sons than anything. I would give up every single piece of technology, everything in life, if that made my sons happy till the day they died. If it made them content and full of life. To me, like that's what's important. Like, man, doesn't, I mean, not everybody has kids, right? But that kind of desire for that peace, that connection, I think is what I think social media to a point has killed, because you don't develop those connections like you used to. I don't blame social media itself. It's just been a byproduct of it, right? Like nobody really knew. Oh, there was theories, right? But nobody really knew exactly where it would go. But I mean, you're definitely you've been around, and like I tell my son, he's 15, and I got one that's 7. I'm like, you guys don't understand. Like, if you want to play with your friends growing up, when I was growing up, and how I developed, I've got a best friend of over 30 years. Well, we hung out all the time. We had to interact face to face. You got to see those little different tones, those quirks, those just those little things that build that friendship, that just build that bond. Like you find something, you're like, oh man, yeah, and then those stupid arguments you have with your friend over the years, that are just pointless. But those things make people closer. And what social media has done is, to a point, is it's made it so that people can be mean to each other and they don't have, like, there's just not, I want to say consequence, right? But there's just not that, they don't have to face that person face to face, whether it's on camera or in person, just seeing those things, right? Because unless you're like a cold hearted individual, which there's plenty, when you see hurt in someone's face, you generally respond different.
Mm,
And social media eliminates that. So to me, it naturally brings out the worst in some people.
well, that's true.
Yeah, and it's just, I could go on, but you said peace is an inside job, right? If I
I did
remember
say that, senor.
right. And so how do we actually, when the news headlines are constant triggers, right? Like I heard the phrase, I believe, emotional triggers is what they call it. I mean, they kind of
Yeah.
get people to, how do we from your point of view, because you're definitely an upbeat and energetic individual. So from your end, how do we combat that kind of emotional grab for the negative?
Emotional grab for the negative. Well, first of all, understand that that's how the news media trains us and makes their money. If it bleeds, it leads, and it wants us scared and it wants us divided. And really, do you want to feed big corporations who are making money off of your adrenaline, off of your worry? There is a way of cultivating peace inside yourself, no matter what's going on in the outside world. And that's everybody's prerogative. It does take some discipline, some kind of meditation practice of some kind. But at some point, if you continue to go up and down like a yo yo with everything that's going on in the world, uh, you're giving your power outside of yourself uh, to a pretty crazy world. It's insane out there. There's a chapter in my book. You talked about how do we combat that level of thinking that we're enemies. And it reminded me of this chapter. It's called The Real Pandemic. Forget COVID. America's grappling with a new super spreader, and it's not airborne, it's ego born. Meet the real
Yes.
pandemic, the MYHY virus. MYHY equals my way or the highway. And it's gone viral faster than TikTok, wilder than conspiracy theories, sweeping red states, blue states, swing states, and might as well be declared the 51st state, the state of fear. You can catch it almost anywhere. Family dinners, cable news, common threads, especially from those sweet little social media algorithms that lovingly spoon feed you points from people who tell you why you should be afraid, who the enemy is, and how to protect yourself. The symptoms of MYHY is one, a spiritual level of certainty that you are right. Number two, an inability to listen without mentally preparing your TED Talk worthy comeback, using words like nuance or with all due respect while exhibiting neither. And here's the kicker: no one's amused. No one's immune. The more certain someone thinks they are, the more likely they've got a stage 4 case of MYHY. This virus doesn't just cause hardening of the attitudes and inflammation of the ego, it also spikes our cortisol, tanks our empathy, turns Thanksgiving dinners into hostage negotiations, turns neighbors into nemesis, and intimate sections and comment sections into digital demolition derbies. But there's hope. MYHY can be put into remission permanently. No masks required, no vaccine needed. The real cure, an open mind, an open heart, gutsy self inquiry. And in the case of the invitation, temptation to relapse, when the heat is rising and you're itching to enlighten those in the dark with facts, links, or one of your greatest rhetorical zingers, instead, I suggest you try what worked miracles for my friend James Twyman. He was having, and this is a great ending, he was having a recurrent argument with his brother over politics. The temptation was escalating until James had enough and said, I really don't know for sure. Maybe you have some valid points. Either way, I love you. There was an awkward silence, and finally his brother said, Damn it, James, how can I argue with you when you say things like that? It ended the conversation in laughter, and James wrote a book all about it called I Don't Know, Maybe I Love You. So those
I mean,
basically were his words. And that's the hardest thing for me. I'm like a recovering MAGA liberal. I used to be so righteous about my liberal points of view. And for me to be able to say to myself and to anyone who has a different point of view, I don't know. I don't know for sure if my point of view is right and yours is wrong. I don't know. Maybe you have some valid points. Either way, I love you. You don't have to say those words, but in some way, the energy of respecting a person who has a different viewpoint, we have to cultivate that as a nation.
yeah, no, and that's definitely important. And I really like the fact that I don't want to say recovering, right? From my end, right? Because it almost seems cynical if I say something like that because that's not who I am. But I've just met a lot of people that I, and not just people that I met, people that I love, right? That are just like when you talk, like how like during that first term when somehow, even though I think it's just kind of something that people pulled out of their butts to justify their anger, pardon my phrase, when they call it Trump derangement syndrome. To me, there's no such thing. You're just angry about something, which is fine. You have every right to be. But I don't call it a syndrome because you're angry. You're allowed to be. And calling it a syndrome implies that there's something wrong with you. And
Yeah. Well,
and I think that that's a very toxic thing to say to people, even though I know, like, I guess apparently, I don't know, I've never personally looked into it, but it's actually like a legitimate diagnosis now.
what does it mean? Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, I guess it depends. So people on the right call it somebody who, when they call Trump Cheeto Jesus and, the ones who like, I'm trying to think, I don't know the girl's name, but the one that got famous where she was on her knees screaming into the air when Trump won the first time and or was inaugurated or whatever. Just things like that, right? Like the people who are just angry and screaming all the time, just, you know, over the top. If
Against,
they, yes, like, but I'm talking more of the ones like, like you were saying, they were sitting in the airplane with their Trump hats on, mega hats, right?
yeah.
When they're talking Trump derangement syndrome, it's the people that walk by and start flicking their hats off and, you know,
Okay. I would rather give it, if we're going to give them a name, I'd rather give them uh, that they're suffering from PTSD, which stands
yes.
for President Trump Stress Disorder. That has a little more humor to it.
I mean,
But
here's the thing,
I'm
like,
not a big fan of labels. I don't even like to call
no, me
people
neither.
narcissistic or codependent. I just don't like labels. I don't like putting people in categories.
Yeah, I think it's just people were angry, right? And depending on you have every right to. You're allowed to be angry about something. It's a human response,
Sure. Part of democracy.
right? And ironically, I know this show been going on for a second, but so I love that you said democracy. So I think I posted a video that said, "Is our democracy in danger?" And it had to do with a guy who had founded the Solutions Party. He kind of talked about we need a certified journalist and should be like an independent agency that relies on donations from the regular people. To make sure that it's not government funded, but to make sure the news is real. But just going, but so somebody had commented on it. Well, that's not, democracy isn't that. That's fascism or something of that nature. And I said, you know, he was like, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And I said, well, technically,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah. I've
I'm like,
heard that.
we're a republic with democratic traditions. We're a representative republic. And I said, and if you want to use the phrase republic, technically China calls themselves a republic, but they are the furthest thing from a republic. How we view a republic, right? Republic can be however you want to view it, but and I think that things like that are kind of what creates that that boiling points for people, right? And it's like, hey man, like, it's whether you're a republic or a democracy, I mean, we vote, right? I mean, that's a democratic tradition. The three branches of government are a federal republic tradition. That's not a democracy tradition. Three branches of government for checks and balances is something from the federalist thinking, not a democracy, because a democracy is pretty much at the will of the people, no, pretty much for the most part, on almost everything. So, and I think that I could go on about how I feel like the American education system has really failed everybody. I used to think, oh man, it's so great. And then I got older and I started learning about things. I'm like, how come they didn't teach us this? They should have taught us this. We should know about these things. This should have been, to me, a lot of these things are like, should have been in like some of the first things you learn when you walk through a classroom door. You should be able to walk up to every 18-year-old and know about some of these basic things. If they're a normal functioning individual without any kind of disability, you should be able to handle that information. Some people have a hard time, remembering whatever, right? But if I'm a teacher or whatever, and I walk in, I've been working with you for 6 months, I should be able to walk in and ask you about what are the Federalist Papers, or maybe not like details, right? But you should be able to give me a basic analysis of it by the time you're 18. Because if you don't, how can you expect, if you don't, how can you expect them to run their lives when they get older? How can you expect them to handle themselves? How can you expect them to be good people? They don't even understand what it means to be a good person at that point. They have an idea, but they may not understand it. And if we're not teaching them, I use World War II as the prime example. In America, World War II has been so washed down when you watch specials on it. It's always about one side's bad. We're the good guys. We came in and saved the day, which technically, when you want to summarize it, is true. But it's negating everything that happened before that, where in reality, looking back, we weren't on the side of good. Everybody, including a lot of Western Europe, viewed Germany at that time as a buffer between communism and them. And that's why he was allowed to be what he was. And why everybody kind of looked the other way for a long time, because they said, well, he's keeping the Bolsheviks at bay. It's not spreading over to our countries. So they kind of looked the other way. I really wish people would actually know about some of those things, or at least just an in general idea, and they would really understand that when they throw out words like fascism and hate, if they truly understood what it means, they might not be so willing to throw it out. And you
Senor,
being you
go
being an
ahead.
author, you know what I mean? I guess that's kind of why I brought that up. You being an author, you might understand that or see where I'm coming from with that.
I don't. I mean, I've never heard what you just said before, so it's new information for me as well.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
something that I
the
learned.
that Germany was helping. Um, yeah, that's just new information for me. So I'm getting an education from you, Joseph.
Yeah, Henry Ford actually wanted to build factories over in Germany, and I believe FDR used I think it was the Defense Act to prevent him from doing it. I believe it was one of those acts right around there. For me, it's like I won't go on all day, but it's just about like the man, like, why wasn't I taught about this? Like, why didn't I know? Why am I finding that out on my own when I was taught about this subject in school? If I wasn't taught about it, fair game, not their job. But if I'm covering this in school in American history, I wasn't taught that. And I just think it's very misrepresenting. Not that, we did the right thing in the end, right? I mean, one of my favorite artists, Tom McDonald, he said, every country is covered in little blood. And it's a very disturbing but accurate fact. Nobody, none of us ever want to feel it. But that's why we need people like you who keep things fun and happy and
Yeah,
joyful.
yeah, and that reminds me. I don't know how much time we have, but I'd love to close with a song.
Yeah, no, I was getting ready to I was getting ready to bring that up. Just kind of give us like a short song summarizing how you feel about everything in general, the conversation,
Sure.
however you want to word it.
So when people worry about the seriousness of these times, I like to remind them we got over COVID, and COVID was pretty darn serious. Like we pretty much have passed through. My grandparents thought the world was going to end during World War I. My parents, as Jews, were terrified during World War II. I used to have nuclear nightmares when I was growing up, fearing the end of the world. My daughter's growing up with the fear that climate change is going to be the end of it for her and for her children. So it seems like from the dark ages with the Black Plague and every generation has their end of the world story. And yet we just keep going on and on. And I think we can learn a lot just from what happened with COVID and how, even though it was a pain in the neck, it brought us together and it helped a lot of people grow up. So I wrote this to the tune of It's a Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong song. I saw, and this is about what I saw that we've all learned from COVID. I saw facial masks, folks getting sick, stuck in our homes, binging Netflix, and I said to myself, it's still a wonderful world. I saw meals being shared. Family slowed down every emotion from joy to despair. And I said to myself, it's still a wonderful world. Could it be that the pandemic, as traumatic as it was teaching us resilience and maybe even love? I saw friends washing hands, standing 6 feet apart, learning there's no distance between our hearts. Now the shift hit the fan. It's pouring like a geyser. Good things will grow from Donald's fertilizer. And I say to myself, it's still a wonderful world. Let's all say it together. I sing to myself. It's a wonderful world.
That was great, man. That was great.
Oh,
Well, Scott, I gotta say, this has definitely been a conversations when I get going into the man, I could go for hours.
me too.
We definitely learn. I definitely learned things from you too. And obviously we've been around. We live in a divided world. All that crazy stuff. But one thing I think that's important that people should take from this is humor isn't just entertainment; it's medicine. And music isn't just melody; it's like a bridge. It kind of gets you, like the dude, kind of like how yours, like and then everybody kind of starts vibing a little bit, right? And we all kind of get into it. And, like if everybody's at a Beach Boys concert jamming the Kokomo, right? Kokomo's kind of like universal across all race, religions, credence. Everybody gets in with that song. You know what? Yeah, I mean, it just kind of appeals to a lot of people. Yeah, Montego. Yeah, down to Kokomo. Yeah, it just kind of gets and that's the key. That's what we need to focus on. Things like what
And
you
also
do.
more good vibrations.
Oh, man, you are not lying. God rest their souls. You
Well,
know,
what's his name recently died, right?
yeah, gosh, Brian, was it Brian?
Brian Wilson.
Yeah, Brian Wilson. Yep, Brian Wilson just recently passed away.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me excitations. Good, good, good,
Good
good vibrations.
vibrations. No, I love that stuff, man.
Good,
Good,
good
good
vibrations.
vibrations. Oh,
Let's
yeah,
end
that's
the podcast Eventually, I'm in no rush, but I know it's
Yeah,
probably
no,
good to start wrapping it up, eh?
yeah, thanks for bringing everything here. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this with us. I look forward to posting this, and I think people are definitely going to love it. It's going to get some really, really good attention because it's going to give people a little bit of an upper beat. So, I thank you for bringing that here to us.
It's been a pleasure.
All
And
right,
and I
thank you.
wanted, I'm sure you can leave this message in the notes, but if anyone wants to hear more of my music or my poetry or look at my books or whatever, my website is scottsongs.com. SCO.
Hey, everybody, check it out, especially if you want something that's about having fun and being lighthearted. That's where you guys need to go. All right, Scott, thank you, and you have a good day. Thanks,
Glad
everybody,
we
for
did
listening.
this. Glad we did this, Joseph.
Me too. You have a good one.
Adios.